I'm Ben Meiselas from the MeidasTouch network, a MAGA insurrectionist who stormed the Capitol during the January 6th insurrectionist and was photographed in that infamous photo clinging to the balcony in the Senate chambers. His name is Josiah Colt. That's the name of that MAGA traitor. Well, Josiah Colt is now set to be sentenced as part of his guilty plea that he issued about a year and a half ago. Sentencing is now set to take place on April 12th of 2023. This, according to a new minute order that was just issued by the district court judge. District court judge is named Dabney L. Friedrich. I'll talk a little bit about the sentencing in a bit. But one of the things to note about Josiah Colt is that Josiah Colt pled guilty fairly early on in the process following the January 6th insurrection and turned on the two co-conspirators who traveled with him from Tennessee to Washington, D.C. In the days leading up to the insurrection with a cache of weapons, a slew of weapons these traitor terrorists brought to Washington, D.C. They never brought the guns into the Capitol building on January 6th, but they had them at the events that they attended, the treasonous events they attended the day before. Let me just remind you of some of the weapons that they brought in. And it was this guy, Josiah Colt. It was also an individual named Ronald Sandlin, another traitor, and Nathan DeGrave. And as a result of Josiah Colt's cooperation, ultimately Sandlin and DeGrave pled guilty a little bit later, and both of them have already been sentenced. Now we have Colt being sentenced after his co-conspirators were sentenced. And so this is what these three traitors, these three terrorists, brought with them to Washington, D.C. on January 5th. The trio brought with them a slew of weapons and gear, including a Glock 43 pistol, 2 magazines of ammunition, a handheld taser stun gun, knives, gas mask, body armor, an expandable baton, walkie-talkies, and bear mace. There's also a photograph that Sandlin, one of the co-conspirators, took of Josiah Colt. And this is what it says: "My fellow patriot, Josiah Colt, sleeping ready for the boogaloo, January 6th. And the term boogaloo, and I think I'm pronouncing it correctly, is a term that's used by MAGA Republicans to refer to a civil war. And then Josiah Colt responded to the photograph that was posted on social media by Sandlin saying, "Ready for any battle." And it's a photo of him sleeping on the bed with a gun in his hand, which is just quite disturbing right before the January 6th insurrection. As I mentioned on the outset of the video, Josiah Colt was the individual who was seen hanging from the Senate chamber balcony. He then dropped onto the floor. This was when the Senate floor was finally evacuated. And then Josiah Colt proceeded to run up to where the president of the Senate sits, the vice president, where former vice president would normally be sitting to count the electoral votes, which was not taking place because these terrorists had trespassed into the Capitol. And then the co-conspirators and people who were there thought that Josiah Colt was sitting in Nancy Pelosi's chair because they didn't know the difference between the House chamber and the Senate chamber. And they basically said, "Dude, you're in Nancy Pelosi's chair. You made history, bro." Well, bros, you're all going to jail, bros. That's what's taking place here. Let me pull up the pleadings in this criminal case and just read for you paragraph 37 of some of the charging documents. That's what it says. "As Colt prepared to climb down to the Senate chamber, DeGrave told the other rioters that Colt was, quote, going down and opening the doors. DeGrave then took Colt's GoPro camera and kept recording as Colt dangled from the balcony and jumped down to the Senate floor. DeGrave cheered as Colt ran to the chair reserved for the Senate president, the vice president of the United States, stating, 'Sit in Pelosi's seat. That's your effing seat now.' DeGrave then instructed Colt to open the door to the antechamber of the Senate floor and to, quote, keep it open. Colt followed these instructions. Sandlin also shouted, don't close that door, later adding, quote, this is one of the biggest events in American history. DeGrave then shouted down at Colt, quote, bro, you just made effing history, bro. You just made effing history. Well, you're going to jail, all three of you. You're traitors. You're terrorists. You are despicable individuals who represent the worst here in the United States of America, complete traitors. Ultimately, Colt pled guilty back on July of 2021. Just goes to show you how long the sentencing has taken. Sandlin pled guilty September of 2022. DeGrave pled guilty June of 2022. So the Justice Department got 3 convictions there. And now the question is, what is the sentence going to be for Colt? Colt only pled guilty to 1 count of felony obstruction and had a cooperation agreement to make sure that the other individuals would also be convicted, that is, co-conspirators would be convicted. And so the sentencing guidelines based on the cooperation for the 1 count, you're going to get angry when I say this, though, is about 2 years, maybe slightly more. But it's not the, look, in that situation, the Justice Department is following the sentencing guidelines. And if you've been following these videos, I'm critical of some of what Merrick Garland's doing. So I don't want to be like, okay, right here, I'm totally good with what's taking place. Quite the contrary. I believe that the minimum sentences for these insurrectionists, if you participated in the insurrection, if you're climbing down, if the night before you're taking photos about civil war, you're breaking into the building like that, I think as a minimum you should serve 20 years. If we're about law and order, 20 years minimum penalty for those who engage in insurrection and trespass. The problem is our laws and our sentencing guidelines have not foreseen the conduct here, and so the sentencing guidelines of this for obstruction for these things does not really recognize the severity of what's taking place here. And so even if the Department of Justice asks for the upper end of the sentencing, and there's cooperation here, so it'll be a slight downward departure from the upper sentencing guidelines, it's still nowhere near what I think the penalty should be. I do want to reflect, though, on the fact that the Department of Justice is batting 1,000 in jury trials on convictions of insurrectionists. They have convicted Oath Keepers of seditious conspiracy in 2 separate trials. They've got the Proud Boys trial where I'm confident that they will secure another seditious conspiracy there. They are climbing the ladder. I know it's taking way too slow. I agree, and all this will be for naught if Donald Trump ultimately isn't indicted. I do believe we will have Trump indictments by May, the latest, maybe May, June, the latest. That was always been kind of my timeline of when I thought that was going to take place, possibly earlier, but just based on the way the subpoenas are going, that's what I think. There's a lot of activity going on in the criminal grand juries relating to Donald Trump right now. So in addition to all of these prosecutions, separately, you've got the special counsel, Jack Smith. And the special counsel gets appointed when there's potentially conflicts of interest, and because Trump announced he was running for president, the DOJ brings in a special counsel to now conduct the investigation to create some separation. But as I mentioned on an earlier video that I did, Tom Fitton, who runs Judicial Watch, he's not a lawyer, he just wears tight shirts and basically pretends he's a lawyer. He gives off the appearance that he's one and gives legal advice even though he's not a lawyer. So there's certainly no attorney-client privilege, who basically wrote the script for Donald Trump to declare victory, regardless of what the outcome would be in the 2020 election. Fitton spoke in front of the criminal grand jury in Washington, D.C. the other day. Special counsel Jack Smith subpoenaed all these states, getting all this information. He's really zeroing down on the elements if you follow what's going on. And any legal observers will tell you they believe Jack Smith's going to indict. They believe Alvin Bragg, Manhattan District Attorney, is going to indict Donald Trump. And they believe, and I believe all of this too, that Fani Willis will likely indict Donald Trump as well. It has all the signs of that right now. But we'll keep you posted. Nonetheless, some justice, if you will, with Josiah Colt sentencing now being ordered by the judge in April. But we'll keep you posted, of course, here on the MeidasTouch Network. Hey, thanks for watching. Hit the subscribe button. We're on our way to 1 million subscribers thanks to your incredible support. Thank you, thank you, thank you. Hit subscribe. Check us out at patreon.com/MeidasTouch. You'll love the exclusive content on our Patreon. But most importantly, it helps grow this independent media platform. And while you're at it, check out our show on Hulu. It's called Killing County. Executive produced with Roe Embriano, Monica De La Rosa, Colin Kaepernick, myself, and the other great people at ABC and Hulu. It focuses on the crime, corruption, police shooting deaths in Bakersfield, which just so happens to be Kevin McCarthy's congressional district. Tell me what you think about Killing County as well. Until next time, I'm Ben Meiselas.
The best part of waking up? MAGA tears in my cup. Check out the new MAGA tears mug available now at store.meidastouch.com. That's store.meidastouch.com.